We must change lives. We must change outcomes by being who we are.
Harnessing your superpower, of course, within the realm of leadership. Now, as I'm thinking of that, I'm looking at the African diaspora. And how can that be applicable to the situation of the African diaspora, who I think are in dire need of leadership?
Persons who mentor people handle what is in their present, did it well, overcame it, and created practice routines and patterns that have been proven to work. When those are multiplied into more and more communities of practice, we get what we call innovations. Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me. And good morning, everyone. I am a Christian leadership consultant and life and career coach, and I really specialize in helping female leaders, especially that are faith-based, to balance their faith and their family and their career while they align themselves with God's agenda and they develop and fulfill their highest potential, which from understanding their God-given purpose and assignment. And so that's really the heart of it. I do it through several programs, but the heart of it is the one-on-one coaching in my 1 month Empower Her program, my 3-month Pivot with Power program, and my courses and my ebooks. I base my conversation today on the book that you see on the screen, which is A Leader Like You, which talks about navigating and handling leadership and harnessing your superpower as a Christian leader in your professional space, whatever space that is. And so today I want to talk about Christian leadership and diplomacy. And for those who want to learn more about the Christian Leadership Essentials, you can also navigate my newsletter and my blog on my website. All right, so we want to dig into this conversation, so we use the time wisely and purposefully as we talk about Christian leadership and diplomacy, and later tie it into the African diaspora as it is. We want to define Christian leadership and diplomacy. We want to look at the intersection of spirituality and effective leadership, and we want to apply Christian principles to the leadership and diplomacy. My colleague would have looked at it from the transpersonal aspect, and so one of the principles is spirituality, a higher consciousness, moving into that place where you operate in the present and you make your decisions in the present and you treat situations as they appear and you live life as it is and not necessarily how you would want it to be. And so that is the navigation under which I want to take this conversation a little further. While I present some leadership paradox, you are either followed as a leader because of your influence, and your influence can come from your position where you are operating from. And so persons traditionally and unconventionally follow you because you are the one in charge. You can also be followed because of your character, who you are. So you are not in authority, you're not in charge, but because of the informal structure of any organization, any communication or interaction, people follow you because they can trust you or you convince them by who you are, your charisma, your persona, that you are worth listening to, you're worth paying attention to, you're worth understanding, and so you're worth following. And then there are others who follow you because of what you know. We call that your expertise. Those also follow you because of who you know and how they think that this can spill out and benefit them. And then there are those who follow you because of what you can do for them. The greatest one, however, is that even if you start from your position and then you develop your character, your expertise, you become connected to the persons because of your position. how it built your character, how you developed your expertise, and who you now know, and what you can do for others and for yourself and for those who you know, leaves the impact. If you make people feel that they have made the right choice and that you can be trusted, then that is the highest point that you can get in relation to loyalty. But there are some paradoxes that come with all of what I've just explained. And so I think you need to know and understand what leadership is not. So leadership is not about your title, it's not about your position or the flow charts. It's really about how you make people feel. So it is one life influencing the other. So a true leader does not demand service, which is a paradox, is how many leaders go, but one who serves. Another paradox is that leadership is not about administration nor expediency. It's about knowing who you are and understanding in the Christian context the power of prayer and the power of faith and being of sound mind and sound doctrine, people being able to trust your word and take your character for what it is, one of integrity, very moral and ethical. And it is not about denomination or domination, but empowerment. So your character becomes your currency and empowerment becomes your trademark, not your personality, not your position. So we want to put it in that context now as we define Christian leadership and diplomacy and transpersonal attributes. We want to look at Christian leadership and understand that if we are to pair Christian leadership and diplomacy, then there is that space, that foundation, that principle that requires you to grow spiritually, to be empathic, meaning you grow socially, and becoming a servant leader, meaning that you become a steward and you become personally accountable in your role and carrying out your responsibilities, and you also make persons accountable, you hold persons accountable. So those three attributes are very important because it breeds unity, it comes from a place of understanding, and it promotes peaceful resolutions. Very important that we understand that principle. So if we are to define Christian leadership by itself, we would want to say that this is a style of leadership that is rooted in the examples and teachings of Jesus Christ, which is really service, humility, and integrity. So rather than focusing on your personal gain and power and authority and image, you seek to reflect Christ's character. And so you are careful, very careful, purposeful, and intentional to lead in a way that glorifies God and uplifts others. And Titus 2:7-8 emphasizes this principle. It says, in everything you must be an example, a good example. You must do what is good. And so that you're teaching, when you talk to other persons, they are able to do what you do and not just what you say because you're in authority. You show integrity. You are very serious about connecting meaningfully with persons and getting them to become masters of their own destiny. And you are sound in your speech because your actions speak louder and your words clearly align with your core values and your beliefs and your actions. So we want to now look at the Christian leadership principle that embodies what we are just saying about being able to represent yourself through the teachings and examples of Christ. The first principle that is very important is that if we are to follow Christ, then we understand that we are servant leaders. Servant leaders mean that we are just committed to serve others before ourselves. So we esteem others higher than ourselves. And Matthew 20:26-28 says, whoever wants to become great among you who want to be in authority, wants to be a leader, wants to have impact and influence, who wants to be significant, you must be a servant. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. And that is what we say leadership is not. We want to also look at servant leadership, prioritizing the welfare and the growth and success of those who you lead or who are under your charge. So rather than using your authority for personal gain and driving fear into people, you support, empower, and uplift others. You listen and you care very deeply about their needs, and your support is felt. It is not just spoken. And more importantly, you lead by example. You lead from a place of belief, of strong belief and conviction. Then you want to look at another principle of Christian leadership, the spiritual guidance, which you seek God's wisdom at all times, and you seek his direction in all your decisions, instead of leaning in your own understanding. You are very surrendered and submitted to him because you know that you want straight paths for your feet. And so Christian leaders are those who rely on God's guidance rather than their own understanding. Then we want to talk about empathy, which is a very important aspect of the Christian leadership principle embodied in Matthew 9 verse 36. We must have compassion. We must care about people. We must love. We must understand. And we must share the hardships and hurts of others. We must respect how they feel. Diplomacy, we are talking about that. And we must actively listen. So empathy is what drives the leaders to truly care for those they lead. The next principle is forgiveness. Forgiveness is very essential in Christian leadership because it admits and embraces the fact that everybody makes mistakes and that people can fail. And when they are failing and when they fall short, we must be there to support, to build, to train, to make people believe in themselves and continue to bounce back from their setbacks and their challenges. And so Jesus says, if you forgive others when they sin against you, then I will forgive you also. Why is that so important in the context of diplomacy? It fosters healing. It builds trust. And overall, it nurtures the collective and personal well-being of those persons, your team members, yourself as a leader, and cements a positive environment for people to grow and develop and to test themselves to see what they can produce. We want to talk about integrity. Integrity is really rooted in ethical principles that comes from that principle on the key standards established in the transpersonal psychology, which is becoming very popular. It talks about persons leading with integrity of heart. So leading is from the inside out. You are in your core honest, you are consistent, and you are morally upright. It is said that the greatest want of men are men who cannot be bought or sold, men who are true to duty as a needle to the pole, who are in their innermost soul true and honest. And so when those qualities, traits, or characteristics are embedded inside the heart of someone, then they have to be ethical. They have no choice because they are staying true to their values, both publicly and privately. They are not imposters. They are the real deal. And so to their own self, they are very true. And so they cannot be false to any man. So they show up unapologetically and authentically at all times and are able to be their best selves because they are self-aware, they have self-compassion, they are appreciative of self, they know their limitations and their strengths, they know what triggers them and how they trigger others, and they move on that emotional intelligent frame that makes them come out very fulfilled at the end of any task or responsibility or goal. Now we want to look at some Christian leadership models to put it in some context, and we talk about the transformational leadership, which is also high on transpersonal psychology, where you inspire and empower others. A very good source of this is The Transforming Leader, which is written by Dr. David McKenna. And there's also an article from Christianity Today, and they explore transformational leadership through Christian lens. How do you inspire and empower others? What is your why? How do you understand and live your why? What is the message you want to deliver? How you want to show up and change people's lives, change their values, transform their mindset. Those types of things come under transformational leadership, change behavior and allow people to be themselves and to master themselves and to understand their why and live their why. And Romans 12 verse 2 encourages that we renew the minds of people. And that is a core concept for inspiring change, transforming the mindset, because it's the mind is the place that is a seat of judgment and action. And so it's the final determinant, and it is the beginning determinant of your actions, of change, of growth, of development. And then 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 highlights the spirit of power and love that leaders can use to inspire and uplift others, that we call diplomacy. All right, we want to look at stewardship, the stewardship model as a Christian leadership model. And in the book Spiritual Leadership, Moving People Onto God's Agenda, we see how stewardship, influence, and resources, how stewarding your influence and resources responsible for making and transforming the lives of people, adjusting outcomes is important. If we look at the Journal of Religious Leadership that talks at the Christian perspective about stewardship and how it aligns to Christian leadership, we will see that it emphasizes accountability, personal accountability, how you manage resources, how you lead yourself, because you have to be able to lead yourself before you can lead others. So what is the development that we're talking about here? We are saying you must be good and faithful in small things so that it becomes easier, and the progress and gradual growth and development of personal responsibility and accountability, leading self, and being a person of integrity in your heart, and being wise and so on, and being able to transform because of your core values and your beliefs would make you a good steward. Then we want to talk about mentorship, how we develop future leaders. And of course, that source, Leadership Coaching, the Discipline, Skills, and Hearts of a Christian Leader, offers these techniques for Christian mentorship and leadership development. But let's talk about it a little, because it is a practice where we show people who we are, and we share what we know. We listen to what they interpret, what they know, understand, and what they know. And then we allow them to show us what they know and what they have learned and how they have intersect those two paradigms and place them into one lasting paradigm. And we work together. So iron sharpens iron. and one person sharpens another. So there is mutual understanding, there is mutual growth, and there is always a resource and a network that gives you net worth, and that is mentorship. Now let's look at diplomacy. How do we define diplomacy? We want to talk about diplomacy as from the Christian leadership perspective, as how we navigate relationships and conflict with grace, wisdom, and humility. So we seek reconciliation and we seek to be at peace with all men as far as it is possible. We foster growth, we foster unity, and we foster harmonious relationships that result in peace. So it is, many people see diplomacy as negotiation, where parties come to an agreement or agree to disagree, or resolving of conflict. But the Christian leader sees it as a reflection and a duty to reflect Christ's love and compassion in every interaction, and to do what is necessary to have people change for the better. And so that is how sometimes tough love comes into the mix. How do we intersect then diplomacy and effective leadership using the spirituality arm or principle of the interpersonal psychology model? We want to understand that if we're talking about diplomacy and its alignment with Christian leadership, we are asked to be peacemakers. And so our first rule of thumb is that we try to live peaceable with all men as far as it's in our power. And so we seek to resolve conflicts and build bridges and not walls in a way that honors God. We listen, we actively listen, and we empathically hear so we can seek common ground and approach disagreements with the spirit of inclusion and acceptance and reconciliation rather than division. We also want to look at how we are expected in diplomacy as Christian leaders to be wise communicators. So we become very mindful of our words, and we are careful not to engage in controversies and conflicting ideas that pulls us away from being gentle and being caring and being responsible, so that we are not allowing emotion and anger to take us over, so our words tear down instead of build up. We are very careful to use communication as a tool for encouragement and mutual understanding. Then we want to look at how we model humility and respect on the side of diplomacy, even when our opinions differ. We want to be inspired by God's humility. We want to treat others with dignity, meaning we want to treat them the way we would want to be treated if the situation is reversed. We want to be very open to the different perspective. We want to make people feel valued and appreciated, even if we are disagreeing. We want to pull persons into consensus. So we want to seek the value in every person as seeing them fearfully made in God's image. So let's look at balancing truth with grace also as it relates to diplomacy and leadership. We want to speak the truth to people. We don't want to be ambiguous. We don't want to avoid making people see themselves for who they really are. What we want to do is to do it in love. So we want to uphold our core values, our faith principles, while extending grace and compassion. But we want to make sure that we balance honesty with kindness so that we promote constructive dialogue and change outcomes, mindset, behaviors, and allow persons to trust themselves as we trust them. So we want to share our authority, we want to share trust, we want to share respect, we want to share autonomy, and we want to share our achievements and our success. We want to talk about building bridges and not barriers. So we want to prioritize unity within our teams, our organizations, and our communities. We want to bridge cultural, social, and ideological divides that exist in our communities, in our workplaces, in our homes, in our country. We want to, when we get into these positions of leadership, we want to promote inclusion and collaboration, just the way God would. We want to look at the grounds of which we want to compromise and can compromise for the good of all, and what are the non-negotiables, and we want to stick to those, because the non-negotiables must be for the common good of all, and not making a popular decision, making the right decision. Then we want to look at how diplomacy and God's wisdom intersect to equal effective leadership. So we have to seek wisdom, and there is wisdom in a multiple of counselors. There is wisdom there, but we want to seek the divine guidance, particularly when we are dealing with crisis situations or very sensitive issues, or we are facing challenging decisions or complex issues that requires more than just multiple counselors and wisdom from diverse perspectives. We want to have a relationship where we are able to tap into a greater power and get the promptings that we need from a dependence on God's wisdom, so that our diplomatic actions are aligned with His will. Then we want to look at the essence of diplomacy, because diplomacy in Christian leadership involves seeking divine guidance, as I said, particularly when you face challenging decisions or complex issues. But you want to look at making it align with God's will. And so leadership and diplomacy can be effectively demonstrated through leading by example. And so this is how we apply the Christian principles to leadership and diplomacy. In the African diaspora, we want to approach or emphasize an approach that starts with leading by example. So it sets a positive tone for others to follow. So by leading by example, we can promote as leaders social, political, and economic growth within the global African community where we rest. We also want to be able to understand the principles that I have highlighted before that talks about servant leadership. And we're speaking when it is very necessary, and our words are sound and serious and carry weight to change ideas and values and behaviors. And we want to be able to build strategic partnerships. So servant leadership means that we are empathic, we have integrity, we are great communicators, and we are collaborators rather than competitors. And then we want to look at the personal influence that we carry. So we want to be able to, if we are talking about diplomacy, especially in the African diaspora, we want to prioritize personal influence over political engagement. How we can change persons' lives, how we can contribute to their collective well-being, how we can sustain the environment, how we contribute to governance, and how we build communities. We have to emphasize our moral responsibility in shaping society. That is something that rests heavily on leaders, Christian leaders, secular leaders. And that is something that is overlooked because we go under the guise of diplomacy to make feel that we must be very tactful, but tact can become very dangerous if we are not able to understand personal influence and our duties and moral responsibility. it becomes very dangerous because it does not necessarily foster, tact does not necessarily foster collaboration. What it does is sweep things under the carpet. And so if we're to talk about diplomacy, we must understand our personal influence, our moral responsibility, and that we must be and have strong partnerships with the right persons and between the communities and nations and governance locally and globally. We must see where we fit and we must take our place, and we must understand that when we get to the table, we bring something that is unique and different, valuable and powerful. We must understand that we are change agents and that we become the mirrors for the weak. And so we must maintain strong moral principles. We must understand our core values, and we must be militant and resolute in standing up for what is right and not what is popular. And then if we are to look at diplomacy in action now in a more personal way, we want to look at some of the principles of transpersonal psychology. And one of those principles, which is the key principle, is non-duality. The Bible talks about that too and believes in non-duality. So there is neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free, nor is there male or female, you are one in Christ. And so it promotes the non-distinctions that are very important for diplomacy in the African diaspora. The social, cultural, and economic differences should be transcended, and we must pull together to have that done. We are to support each other in our different spaces and frames that we find ourselves. And we must share the idea as we bond together in the diaspora, we must extend ourselves to include others. Because we are to also look at promoting equality, no hierarchy or superiority based on race or gender or our status. We must never at any point see the need to accept oppression in any form, because there's no justification for oppression or discrimination. When I say accept in any form, there are some of us who feel privileged because we see privilege as it's not happening to us, and so we turn the other cheek and we are not interfering in what doesn't concern us. But we can support people who are being oppressed. We can actually do what we can in our small world to ease the burden that they are feeling. If we do not want to be out there on the mainstream, we can have the principle of non-discrimination when it comes to support and help, and we can do it from where we are standing without drawing unnecessary attention to ourselves for those who feel that they need time and adjusting and understanding to act on person's behalf, which is a very wise and prudent way to go, because we are not to call oppression upon ourselves, neither are we to call discrimination upon ourselves. Then another principle that is important is the empathy. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. So what am I saying? We are to take people with us. We are to share the experience of others, and we must share our experiences with others. So there are no isolated entities. We must foster unity and inclusivity in our spaces. As we move up, we can move with others, and we must move honestly, and as we said, ethically. So even if we are giving persons an opportunity, because that is the position we hold, that is our character, that is our expertise, that is where we are going, how we are making people feel, and what is our divine purpose and calling as a Christian leader, directed and prompted by God, who has given us the wisdom. We want to pull people and put them in places and delegate them with responsibility that really can do what we want them to do, and not by connection or favor. And so we must also have a mutual understanding of the role we play and the role that they play. And we must do the intersection very intentionally, very wisely, and very fairly. We must be fair and just in how we navigate diplomacy as a leader, and more so as a Christian leader. And in the African diaspora, we must show respect for others on our team and in the spaces that we find ourselves. The superiority complex that we have sometimes and the inferiority complex can work for or against us. We have to be guarded and careful that as we respect diversity, we are not compromising, and that our non-negotiables are standard and that they are rational and reasonable, so that we can have what the Bible calls a win-win solution, because that is also possible, to accept the things that we cannot change and the wisdom to know the difference. We must mediate disputes with fairness and compassion, and we must negotiate well. We must seek mutually beneficial solutions and not give in to the thing that is popular. I keep saying that because diplomacy in this world in 2024, a lot of times we tend to make decisions that are popular and are not prudent or wise, nor serve the common good of all. And so we must also respect diverse cultures and worldviews as we engage in cross-cultural engagement. And we must leverage our expertise and relationship to ignite positive change, which is what we are really calling influence. What am I saying as I end? If we're talking about Christian leadership, effective leadership, transformational leadership, and diplomacy, we are talking about loving our neighbor as ourselves. We are talking about making sure that what we do for others and what we do to them is what we would want done to us if the situation was reversed. Diplomacy means that we balance privilege so that all persons are served well and their best interest comes to the forefront, that they can show up unapologetically, be their best self, and become masters of their own destiny, that they can test themselves to see what they can produce, and at the end of it, they can say, well done. I have fought a good fight, I have finished the course, and I have established my purpose. I have supported, and I was supported, and I have left a mark so that those who come behind me will find me faithful. Thank you so much for listening. So if we talk about, I want to end right here, to be truly effective in good times and in times of great challenge, leaders must master the ability to first lead themselves, then others. So you must walk with the wise so you can become wise, and you must be responsible for your actions. If you do wrong, try to make it right. You must be responsible for your words, because we say your words must be sound. Say what you mean. And mean what you say, but not in a mean way. Be responsible with people's feelings. All of these are diplomacy. Other people's hearts are not your toys. They are not to be played with, poked, bent, or broken. And you must be responsible for your own life. You are in charge of your life and how you live. You must fix your motivation and lead with the right influence. And you must be steadfast, immovable, always abounding in the work, for as much as you know that your labor is not in vain in the Lord. You must accept responsibility for your actions. You must be accountable for your results. And you must take ownership of your mistakes. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the time and for the sharing. This has really been incredible value. So I believe that the people that are listening to us, they are getting value from it. All right, so we are now in the Q&A session. I want to thank you again. One of the first questions I would like to ask you is effective leadership. So let's start by saying, what is really an effective leadership? Why do you think this is important for us in the diaspora? What do you say about that?
First of all, I see effective leadership as knowing your why, understanding your why, and living your why. All of us have different gifts, and our assignments are different. And where we are to carry out our assignments is also different. And so once we understand that Mary's assignment and calling is not mine, and answer the prompting on your heart, then you are able to be directed into what you really are to do and how you are to, the message you are carrying and how you are delivering that message and how you are impacting people. That way you become very effective. It is not meeting deadlines. It is really not your flow charts. It's really not being able to meet those standards and get the outcome so much. It's really about how you make people feel and how you allow them to change their lives, become masters of their own destiny, understand and live their why, and become fulfilled and loyal in what they see as life. How you allow them to make meaningful connections, how you allow them to live out their core values, how you allow them to contribute value, their value, to what is the desired outcome, how you allow them to interpret their role in that, and how you allow them to, their motivation and what drives them to intersect in such a way that they show up at all times at their best.
Another thing that you said, I think you actually said it at the beginning of this episode, when you just started, and you talk of it as harnessing your superpower, of course, within the realm of leadership. Now, as I'm thinking of that, I'm looking at the African diaspora. Could you say more about that? And how can that be applicable to the situation of African in the African diaspora, who I think are in dire need of leadership? What do you say about that?
I want to say that part of our issues in the diaspora is our lack of emotional connection to our roots, our identity, and the difficulty and struggles that we have to strike that balance in relation to the isolation that we feel, the alienation that we can feel, the fear that drives us to fit in, the adjustments that we have to make to understand culture and to actually live and adopt the cultures that we have, our beginnings, our history, our past, and how those things affect us. I think that's one of the greatest issues that we have, the identity crisis, the cultural and the political interference, the hurt and the trauma that we take into these settings. One of the things that we find very difficult is accepting. The moment we begin to accept it, whatever it is, that it has happened, that this is our present, this is what we need to get done, then our mindset becomes adjusted. And that's one of the things that we need to be able to do, change our mindset by accepting our situation, looking at the alternatives, looking at the role that we can play where we are and how we can adjust. If we look at we are more flexible and adaptable, then we begin to harness our superpower that is leading ourselves. As we lead ourselves, we get clarity and the confidence to me as we look at the progress we make and we look at the things that we need to be thankful for, and we begin to make the changes that we can make where we are, and we begin to be loyal to the persons who understand and who are placed on our path to carry us to the different points that we must go. The danger that we have is that sometimes we linger in what could have been, what should have been, and then we don't look at what is, and we don't take it from the framework of what is. And so we find that we carry this victim mentality, we carry this sense of entitlement instead of the creators that we are, the innovators that we are, the survivors that we are, the resilient warriors that we really are. We focus on what happened instead of what we carried out. If we begin to open that package of what we carry out, then we will be able to begin to lead others, lead ourselves, and harness those parts of us that have been created in us to carry us through these challenges, to carry us through these intersections in our lives, to carry us through these seasons, and we will be able to master them. That is one of the deficiencies that keep us back and keep us stuck. Once we free our minds and we live in the present, we get a greater break and understanding and confidence to navigate the future.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Marcia. Now, another thing I was also reflecting on is that you made mention of people deciding to follow certain leaders, which I think it is very important for understanding. In that now, when we talk of leadership, we also need to talk about followership, because without followership, you are not a leader. But what I sort of curious about that is, why do some people follow certain people as their leader? What is some of the things they see in an individual that they choose to follow them, like, hey, come and lead us? Can you say something about that? Of course, we're talking about the qualities now.
You know, there is a danger in leading by example, because when we lead by examples, we know ourselves. We have mastered leading ourselves, and we what we expect from others is what we give. We do all the things that we are required to do, which can lead to burnout and stress. But one of the greatest things that I think we ignore in leadership is that by leading by example, being great and exceptional leaders, we can develop what I call a leadership cult, meaning persons begin to depend on us solely for direction, for guidance. They look at every word that we are putting out there, and they rest on every word. And so they begin to follow us because of the expertise they find in us, the character, our trustworthiness, and our capabilities. And they actually stick to our personality and our charisma. That is the reason why people follow leaders. They find that you show up unapologetically at all times. You seem to have it all together. You deliver results. You care about people's needs. You change their lives and their circumstances. So they become very loyal to you. So no matter what happens, they stand by you. But the danger is when a leader who is leading by example, motives become different, become so confident in his or her leadership that you do not take counsel or advice, that you become nonchalant, that you think that you can be in danger. You are not alert enough and observant enough to find that those who have become your followers and who you have close to you right have changed and some are disgruntled and disengaged because you are so confident in yourself. You're in your invincibility. You're now feeling that you're so invincible that nothing can touch you. And the persons who follow you believe that also, and sometimes try to adopt those types of examples that you are giving. There are some who work, burn the midnight oil, and stay over and give back to the point of duty. Those who admire you and follow you might take up those habits and ignore self-care and so on. So the balance has to be that when you have a followership, you understand the dynamics of your followership, you understand the different levels of your followers, and you become very intentional and purposeful to gauge your leadership, that persons are built and uplifted. And as we said before, that you give service and not demand service.
There was another thing I was actually reflecting on in your presentation. Is the term non-negotiable. I think you used it a couple of times. So what I was thinking when you were doing the presentation is, how do we define our non-negotiable that sort of come to guide our conduct with people? What do you say about that?
And so your non-negotiables is what you're not prepared to give up, because it is usually aligned to your core values. Your core values of honesty, integrity, of punctuality, you are not willing to give up those. When you negotiate with others, when you are interacting with others, you may say to them, if you're 5 minutes late, I won't be there, because that is your non-negotiable. You believe in time, how you're using your time and your energy. You feel that you get the best value if you're early and you get your things done quickly and efficiently. And so that might become a non-negotiable for some persons. There are some persons also who are honest to the core. They believe that you must be honest and you must admit your mistakes, and you must bear the consequences. And so in a case where you might be a sub leader, or you might also be a leader, and you're asked to take the blunt for those others who have not stepped up to the plate and so on, you might choose to say, okay, I can't, that is a non-negotiable. They are at fault, I will highlight the fault, but I will also show mercy, and I will show some compassion, and I will give the necessary support. Those are non-negotiables, the things that you are not prepared to sacrifice or give up for anything. And so, and they are usually based, I say, on your core values. They are normally good and sound things that are a part of the sum total of what you would call your character. So they are character currencies that serve your purpose and make you sleep at night. And so they are non-negotiables.
Character, and you call it currency. Okay. Okay, now we're still within the diaspora. Of course, the entire conversation is about the African diaspora, about leadership, and also about diplomacy. Now, tell me something about the role of good diplomacy and value in the African diaspora community. How do we promote this when we, okay, you see, in the diaspora, we need to have a lot to do with other people that are not like us, other people that don't share our value, other people that don't have our interests. But we still need to deal with them because we are living in a space that we need to coexist with other people. We are diaspora. This is one of our characteristics. Otherwise, we should be in Africa where we have the same people. But if we are living now in the UK or in the US or in Germany or in France, you are sharing a space with a different other people with different orientation altogether. You still need to deal with it. You cannot say now, I don't want to talk to you. It's not possible. Now, how do we become diplomatic in this way and yet maintain our value?
You know what I'm finding is that persons want us to be ourselves. And we seem to be anxious from the African diaspora point of view, or Caribbean. We seem to be anxious to assume what people want outside of us being ourselves. Persons want to understand us, and persons want to learn from us. Of course, there are exceptions to the rule, and these persons who are exceptions don't get on with anyone. They don't even get on with themselves because they really and truly don't know what they want, and they are so based on self-gratification and selfishness and getting their desires and wishes out front that they sacrifice even their own and persons that they love. And so we're not talking about those persons. We are talking about those who are really out there. The average person in the diaspora in a different setting from us want to understand us, want to respect us, want to hear our ideas. We must not be willing to sacrifice ourselves and our values and our culture and our motivations and understandings to please. We must share them very lovingly and respectfully. We must highlight why we have these values, why we act a certain way, what are our beliefs and our values, and we must say how we can adopt them so there is mutual engagement, mutual understanding, and mutual benefit. We also want to give people the benefit of the doubt. When we engage with people, we must be true to ourselves, and we must present ourselves honestly, and we must present ourselves confidently, because who we are will not change because of who we are speaking to. What will change is how we communicate and present who we are to people. Honesty and kindness and integrity is valued everywhere. There might be struggles in the end because of a lack of trust, but if we are consistently showing up authentically and as who we are, if we are truly treating people the way we want to be treated in the diaspora, in the different contexts, in the different settings, if we are ethical, if we have integrity, if we try to be peaceful, if we try for reconciliation and amicable resolutions, if we really are respectful and understanding and empathic and compassionate, we will reap those results, because kindness begets kindness. Honesty begets honesty. Whether people believe it or not, it does happen. Those who are in front of you might not be honest with you, but if something comes up that there is some negotiation, if your enemies will try to go back now to be just and fair, because that kindness, that honesty, that integrity, that genuine showing up comes to the surface, and persons cannot ignore that. They can ignore the good that they do to you, but they will never forget the evil. And so it confronts them and forces them to accept who you are and what you are. We need the patience to wait on those seasons to change, those tides to change. But what we must never do is change us. We must show up as we are, and we must take steps to better ourselves so that we become better negotiators. And negotiations meaning that as we interact with people and we show up as ourselves, we understand what we bring to the table, and we make sure that what is put on that table is of best value. That will never at any time make us worse off. It will always make us better off.
Thank you so much for that. Among my people in east and south of Nigeria, it is said that a society is doomed or dead if the young ones are not taught the old tricks. In that, if you don't teach children something, they don't know it by miracle. You need to teach them. So I'm saying that to me, what is the role of mentorship? Because you thought of mentorship. You have passed through an experience. For another person to know about your experience, you need to share with them. You need to teach them. Otherwise, they cannot just break your head and know. So tell me more about this.
As I said before, mentorship in the diaspora is developing future leaders. What do future leaders in any specific frame or space or environment carry? They carry the message and the story of life, of your life, how it is interpreted, how it is lived, and how it is navigated on a daily basis. They carry the story of resilience. They carry the story of preservation. They carry the story of understanding. And they carry the story of change, creativity, and innovation. What do I mean by that? When we talk about mentorship, whether we are parents, whether we are in organizations, whether you are mentors in our community, we simply teach people what we know. We show them what we know. We tell them what we know. We act on what we know. They observe us. And then they interpret what we know in the ways that they understand it. They tell it back to us. They show us what the interpretation means to them in their actions. And then they also show us what they know, how they navigate their space and how it is resolved. We learn from them and they learn from us. Then we merge the knowledge so they emerge wiser and stronger. And as they develop and grow and create a community of practice, they bridge the gap between what existed, what is present, and what will be the future. They are positioned through mentorship to become more resilient and to handle whatever is in their present. Persons who mentor people handle what is in their present, did it well, overcame it, and created practice routines and patterns that have been proven to work. When those are multiplied into more and more communities of practice, we get what we call innovations, and we get what we call resistant traits. And those strains are built up. If we look at our immunity and how we talk about the strains, that how we fight against, for example, the strains of COVID, that's the very same thing we do when we are effective mentors. We create and we build on those strains, and they become more and more resilient, and they become more and more in time. They become more and more active. They become more and more critical. They become greater innovators, creators, and problem solvers, because what you give them, the foundation that they're building on, is a sure foundation, and it does not limit them. It expands their understanding. It expands their actions. It expands their motives and their interpretations.
Thank you so much for that. I appreciate that. Okay, we're talking about leadership today in the diaspora.
I want to emphasize, that mentorship is really a partnership. Many times when we think that when we mentor people, we just teach them our expertise, we just show them what we know, but we also hear from them, and that's the crossover is very important. You see that crossover where there is mutual understanding and a mutual community of practice that is developed, where I teach you, you teach me, and together we do, is very important.
Thank you so much for that. All right. So, like I was saying, now we're in the diaspora. We're talking about leadership in the African diaspora community. Is it possible that we can say that there are some good leaders out there that we can learn from? When you look around yourself, okay, in the diaspora community, it's a large community, not necessarily maybe in Jamaica where you are, maybe in the US or in the UK or in France or in Canada or in Germany. Are there some people that we can look up to and say, okay, these are really living according to the description that we are talking about today as good leader?
There are numerous persons out there, female, young leaders. They are, and let's go back into the African diaspora. When we talk about Zion, he's an excellent leader. He's a young leader. We look at Alotunji, very excellent, effective leader. We look at Amaka. Those are Victoria Johnson. Those guys, those girls and guys are powerful leaders. If we go down to Dr. Nana and if we go down to David Douglas, those types of persons, we find that they are more mature and they are leaving a trail of significance behind. They are developing future leaders. They are building strong, resilient community members who seek to make an effort and do a lot of things. There's another person out there that is called Romain, that is an industry leader and who talks about the struggles he got through, how many times his business failed, how many times he became bankrupt to become a resourceful standout leader in his little space and in his community. There are leaders who are developing too by way of association and the pain that they are going through. That is developing their greatest ministry. And there are leaders also who are developing because of the struggles that they are facing and how they see that they must come out of it and how they must fight to become masters of their own destiny. There are numerous leaders. If we come over now into the US, we find that the African diaspora is very militant and strong and has a voice in Congress and so on. And so they become very powerful leaders. We also have the history of leaders across the space of Africa. Some of them are Mandela. We have those persons out there who are leaders in their own right and who are really the epitome of greatness. And sacrificial leadership and servant leadership and steward leaderships who ask that we maintain what we are doing and keeping it together. There are numerous leaders that we can look up to and that we can follow, emerging, seasoned, and experienced. There are some who have died also and are gone, but they have stood the mark of time. Marcus Garvey is one of those persons that I can speak about in the Jamaican experience, and we have Bob Marley, which is also one of those greats. We have Louis Bennett. Those are powerful leaders who has bridged the gap and who fit in up to now. Their material, their life, their contributions are still significant and still give us, still determine outcomes and still influence actions and decisions at greater levels. So we do have people, if we are to span it across the generations and age groups, we have enough. We have sufficient, and we have others that are developing.
There are good leaders out there. Of course, it is important to point that out there. That, of course, we don't necessarily say that you must be at the global level now before you can be considered a leader. Even in your local community, you can become a leader by just standing up and doing what you feel is right. It is not like it is written on the wall now that everybody must go to do that. If you don't do that, you are not a leader. Because what I've sort of seem to say here quite often is that you need to operate from where you are. Martin Luther King was saying, if you cannot run, you can walk. If walking is what you can do, then walk. So we could expand on that and say, okay, you don't necessarily need to lead just because you are speaking in the podium. You could lead by being in your music industry if you are a musician. You might do your own part by writing if you are a writer. You might do your own part by teaching others. That is what you know how to do. So everybody must operate from where they are, from your capacity, from your vantage point, because each of us is equipped with different tools and technology and instruments. So we need to use those instruments to be able to shine wherever we find ourselves. What would be your final thought here to conclude the conversation?
And I want to end again, because I find that this is sometimes lacking. Where I want to end is that if leadership is what we're about, then we must lead ourselves. If significance is what we want to leave behind as our legacy, then we must impact lives. We must change lives. We must change outcomes by being who we are. So we must believe in ourselves. We must lead ourselves. We must understand our why. We must know how we want to show up, and we must deliver. That is what I would want to leave with us. Delivering means that I understand really whose I am, that I am fearfully and wonderfully made, that my path has been established, and that when all is said and done, my character is my currency, my spiritual currency, and my literal currency on this earth, because my character is who I am when no one is looking. And so if I am true to myself, I can never be untrue to any man. When I know who I am and what I'm doing, I will show up, man, honestly, authentically, and truly with the sum total of who I am. Whether I am a person who made mistakes, I have failures, whatever I am, once I am true to myself, I cannot be false to anyone.
That's so true. That's so true. I appreciate you, sister. I appreciate you for your sharing here, for your lecture and your value. They're so full of nugget that people can apply right away. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate you.